Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Robin Cairns. It's my honour to be head of the School of Environment, and it's my very particular honour this evening to be asked to introduce my colleague, and I underline the word Professor Nicolas Lewis. I'd just like to begin by saying I don't think I've been to an inaugural lecture where I've seen so many people hugging each other. And I think that just sort of represents the fact that Nick is someone who brings people together in a community of not just scholarship but mutual regard. And I've seen people this evening I haven't seen for quite some time from various parts of the university where we don't usually get to see each other because we're so busy with our feet under our desks, sort of staring down the screen doing things that we really shouldn't need to be doing. That was a little bit flippant, wasn't it? But we're here this evening to celebrate the achievements of my very valued and dear colleague and friend Nick. So there's a couple of particular reasons why I find it a great honour that the Dean, who sends apologies, as does Professor Richard Laheron, one of Nick's friends and mentors, there's a particular reason why I feel very honoured to be asked to do this introduction. One is that more so than probably any other inaugural lecture that I've attended or introduced, I go further back with Nick, deep into the days of the geography department across the road when it was based in the Human Sciences building. And Nick, like myself, is someone who considers themselves first and foremost a geographer, not a social scientist. Only if you really are pressed by the census or something. And I guess the second reason why I'm very particularly grateful to be offered this opportunity to introduce Nick is that Nick is someone whose scholarship and way of being in the world and being in the university, probably more so than any of my colleagues, gives great fidelity and honour to the aspect of the Education Act that says we are to be critics and conscience of society. And in Nick's case, as you'll probably hear this evening, his critic and conscience role is not just a vantage point directed out into the world, but it's one that's directed into the world of the university itself. So Nick has traversed, I was going to say terrains, but it involves the marine world as well, doesn't it? So I'm at a loss for the descriptor, but Nick has, in his research, traversed worlds ranging from, more recently, the high seas, through to fashion, wine, education. Bit of a Renaissance man. And that's really impressive, you know. I guess as a fellow shameless eclectic, I think that that's really part of what we need to respond to in the vocation of being a geographer, to be attentive to this world and to be constructively critical of the world that we're in the quest that we may somehow contribute to a better world. So Nick, it's my honour to be introducing you. I look forward to your comments. And Nick did say that he has so much to say, and we do need to be out of here by 6:45, that there will be no questions. Any questions, Nick tells me, can be raised over a beer at Galbraith's afterwards. So over to you, Professor Nicolas Lewis.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thanks, Robin, for your introduction. I think it's time for us all to go home. And thank you all for coming. We are the university, and it's an honour to address you. I've had a haircut and all. But to those who drink regularly in the old government house, sorry, no fusty, butterscotch-coloured corduroy geography teacher chic for you tonight, to quote The Guardian. We should all really be somewhere else, I feel, getting trolleyed. and slam dancing perhaps on the ruins of Peter Thiel's bunker. This may go on, unfortunately, as Robin suggests, until the hour is up. I do apologise for any concepts that get butchered and seem in places, the account will seem in places to be an us versus them one, which is not my intent, but probably my words. But it is my party, and so we'll run with that. I arrived in Auckland from the Pacific in February 1982. I'd never previously lived in a city. In my bag were 3 T-shirts, an island print dress shirt, green corduroy flares for the winter, a pair of Nike Elite running shoes with the toes cut out, a Roger's Thesaurus, and a pirated copy of Donna Summer's Bad Girls on cassette. My mother had given me $500 to last the year, most of which was spent by Easter on vodka and a pair of football boots. What am I saying? They were expensive in those days. In the 40 years since, the University of Auckland has become my community. I am of this place, a committed and loyal citizen, a fierce defender of its possibilities, and an unapologetic critic of that which would erode them. In what follows, I hope to convey a whiff of me, where I come from and who I am, a sense of what I have done at this place, what I think is important about it at this moment, and how I might explore its potentiality, and why calling me a social scientist bothers me. The talk will be formal as befits the occasion, so one in the eye to you, anonymous one. It will, I hope, also be passionate. Here we go. Geography at Auckland turned 75 in 2021. This year, we had only 5 students in our compulsory postgraduate course, and numbers are falling in schools. In 2025, we will stop running first-year geography courses. Geography stands nervously in the crosshairs of a university-wide program of course rationalisation that has little regard for disciplinary boundaries. Diagnoses by those who should know better suggest that the numbers represent a terminal loss of interest in the discipline. Yet the university is institutionalising a transdisciplinary teaching program that looks much like geography itself and is taught by geographers. New Zealand's government is redefining nation and has launched an extractionist economic growth program. Democracy and its spatial checks and balances are being undermined at home as they are elsewhere. Climate change disasters, resource wars, and a proliferation of military conflicts speak to the increasing complexity of economic, political, and environmental geographies at all scales. The apocalyptic and genocidal annihilation of Gaza and the disintegration of Sudan top a bill of global injustice that is sapping humanity. Everywhere, liberalism is in crisis, and social institutions necessary to enable individual freedoms, justice, and equity are under multi-pronged attack. Just when we need a politics of the collective, we see a new demagoguery and an intensifying politics of feeling and self-interest. Geography has much to say about these things. It is surely the time for a discipline that examines the interaction between spatial dynamics and lived places. Students are surely interested. If not, then where are the billboards imploring them to make a world where their selves might have meaning? This is an unsettling moment to be asked to profess geography. Tonight I address this unease from a position framed by my own journey as a scholar located in geography in a School of Environment in the Science faculty at the University of Auckland. The location is important. Auckland is quite some distance from both Mangaya Cook Islands and Opunake Taranaki, the 2 places that have been most formative of my early self. It was further still from the other 10 places where I lived before that. I grew up very much a subject of my father's educational commitments and his restlessly futile search for a winnable education-based emancipatory project on multiple continents. We lived in schoolhouses and never in the same one for more than 2 years. There is an Englishness, a Pacificness, and an Aucklandness to my accent, scholarship, and being, and a certain contrariness. If there is an anchor, it's to my immediate family who have travelled with me. My mother Jill is a long sufferer of the road, but the architect of a thrifty, successful, and values-based household, and the manager of a family that survived the travels. Completing a degree later in life, she became a deeply caring Waikato-based probation officer and is now a wonderful grandmother living in Milton Keynes for her sins. My father, David, provided an upbringing rich with educational and other forms of cultural capital, and an example of the conflicted character required of obsessive commitment and a failure to accept the world had its own agency. His was a journey from grammar school through Cambridge and the footlights, a rejection of the British establishment, teaching and sports coaching success, a deep embrace of the possibilities of independence and development, and a state honour from the Sultan of Brunei to finally come to rest on Rarotonga, COVID's first victim in the Cook Islands. Some people in the audience actually know my brother. My siblings have found stronger place-based moorings. My brother Owen, inveterate hustler and committed educator in Māori and Pacific communities, is now Secretary of Education in the Cook Islands, while my sister Natasha, once teacher of te reo total immersion classes in 2 Auckland intermediate schools, is now a teacher and a props mistress and choreography. She's a teacher, a props mistress, and a choreographer of a Pacific fusion dance troupe in the UK. My own mooring is to my 3 daughters and to Heather, my partner in life of more than 35 years. Previously in advertising and PR, Heather retrained as a teacher as the kids arrived and is now a nationally recognised primary school educator. The girls, Charlotte, Victoria and Holly, are all confident, funny and successful young women, and in and out of the nest. Vix and H are here tonight, as are my sister-in-law Judy and some of our oldest friends. That we are here owes everything to Heather and much to Judy, who proofread my PhD thesis and told me she couldn't follow it beyond the first paragraph. A bitter pill, but as tonight hopefully demonstrates an effective one. Geography was not my first port of call. Partially clothed and armed unnecessarily with my thesaurus, I began university as a commerce student. Within a year, I was in front of Dean Tarling, asking to switch to a conjoint degree. He glowered at me over his glasses, and from behind a desk framed by a wall of books, and asked why I thought I was good enough. This was more like the ivory-towered university of my imagination and emerging desire. While possibly not involving the arts to which Tarling had suggested I was not born, I completed a conjoint degree majoring in anthropology, geography and economics. With no home other than the University of Auckland, the next step meant masters, but in what discipline? I was by then Marxist, a fierce critic of development processes, globalisation and neoclassical economics, and very close to the staff in anthropology. Geography, however, came with a discipline-defining licence to do whatever I wanted, which was to return to the Cooks to write a thesis on the articulation of modes of production. Yeah, I think that slide was supposed to go there. Following the thesis, I coordinated Geography 102 in 1988 and Auckland's first cross-disciplinary Pacific Studies course, which led to convening a Pacific Island student collective and the monograph Coconuts Begin with a C, outlining the challenges facing Pacific students at the university. By the end of 1988, I had met Heather, the keeper of the key to Colenso's Moet locker. We disappeared overseas for 6 years in 1989. H working with a PR company in Mayfair cleansing the images of miscellaneous incurable tyrants, and I pulling pints next door, and later calculating annual returns on property portfolios for pension funds in Camden, which is a much more exciting part of town. In breaks, we backpacked. I learned much about who I was and wasn't, and fortunately H stuck around. We returned in 1995 to a country much changed by the neoliberal reforms. A chance encounter with a very different Dean of Arts, Warren Moran, saw me return to a welcoming University of Auckland. There followed 12 years of PhD, self-funded research, precarious employment, breeding, and multiple international student homestays. For PhD, shut up, Victoria. The PhD asked how we had become neoliberal. It demonstrated how Ear Over School Audit Agency turned parents into choosers and made parental choice a market by publishing its audits of school practices as de facto quality markers. Working with governmentality analysis and a regulation theory borrowed from Offa and Roger Dale, it argued that neoliberal statecraft was about shaping subjectivities as well as privatising stuff. That parental choice was made and audit was a neoliberal technology par excellence. I can't believe she said this. Voltaire's bastards dealt with, there have been many projects since. The tale is one of strategic opportunism grounded in geography's scholarly promiscuity and emancipatory project. Projects and phases bleed and overlap as do the different roles of the academic as teacher, researcher, and institutional citizen. There really was no map. The precarious years began with teaching foundation studies in geography as a leave replacement for Lindsay Blue and supporting Warren to establish the Wine Industry Research Institute and Auckland's Wine Science Program. I taught on its graduate program and researched the governance, regulation, and development of the New Zealand industry. This period opened doors to the centre of the science faculty, while Warren's mentorship and weekly wine tastings also opened them into the arts faculty. You can see where I preferred to go. All this gave me rare and privileged insights into the university, which really have marked my time here. A fast start at Marsden and a postdoc followed, examining brand New Zealand and the making of New Zealand's wine, fashion, and international education industries. They opened opportunities to work with Maureen Malloy and Wendy Lana and renew relationships built through the PhD with sociologists of education Susan Robertson and Roger Dale. The idea of economies in the making, or economisation, has informed the rest of my work. My arts context led to 2 years of teaching the core course in development studies and encounters with post-capitalist and post-development ideas. With Yvonne Underhill Sam, I responded to an invitation from my brother to do some asset mapping with Te Rarawa. He was at the time managing Te Oranga for the iwi's Runanga. That work helped me to rethink contemporary regional development in terms of diverse Māori economy. It also prepared me some years later to reflect critically on the development project in one of my favourite pieces, published in an edited volume of papers by ageing white Pacific Studies scholars returning to their field sites 30 years after their first work. In 2004, as the only public goods funded social science postdoc, I was named on BRICS, the National Building Research Capability in the Social Sciences Program. BRICS was a 5-year multidisciplinary cross-university network designed to build national social science institutions. With the support of fellow geographers Richard Leheron and Dick Bedford, I played an increasingly significant role in BRICS and ended up leading its early career research activities and co-leading its next phase. This led in turn to an appointment to He Waka Tangata, a national mid-year social science forum funded by Morst, and to editorship of the new New Zealand Social Sciences journal Ko Tui Tui. Sometime in the late noughties, I became a full-time academic in the School of Environment. Took a lot to get a job in this place. And at about the same time, I joined a major Singapore-based research group investigating international education in East and Southeast Asia, alongside Francis Collins and the now Queensland-based Ravinder Sidhu. At the end of the noughties came the Biological Economies Marsden program, led by Richard and Hugh Campbell, and involving economic geographers and rural sociologists. The project produced a critique of productivist agriculture from economic, sociological, and environmental perspectives. It explored artisanal forms of agri-food activity, experiments in provenancing, and the growing prominence of a diverse Māori-controlled economy, and the regional development possibilities of all these things. These are laid out in a public-facing book edited by Eric Pawson. You'll notice that poor old Carolyn Morris is the only woman in that photograph. It very much was the last hurrah for a particular era. It also allowed Richard and I to sharpen our understandings of the potential of post-structuralist political economy, which we laid out in a second publication that brought PSPE, More Than Human Theorising and Economisation, into conversation. The project also yielded the Actor Network story of Morto Mouse, another of my favourite pieces of work. The paper uses the Parliamentary Commission of Inquiry on Fonterra's botulism crisis to ask why the death of a mouse nearly 2 years later brought Fonterra down, nearly brought Fonterra down. It questions the underlying rationality of globalisation and multi-sited processing of bulk products that created the opportunity for a broken lens from a torch used to inspect a storage camp, and how that led to the death of a mouse a year or two later. A set of events that cost the collective anywhere up to $1.5 billion, depending on how you do the numbers. And it really did highlight for me the level of complexity and disorder that is normal, but not normally seen. As biological economies unfolded, these two artefacts appeared mysteriously on staff desks at the University of Auckland. Reduce your waste, stop smoking, embrace sustainability, and dob in your neighbour. Not to your boss, note, but to KPMG. That was to whom, sorry. Different lot. The other lot. Facilitated by, it turned out, that in another part of the HSB, anthropologist Chris Shaw found these icons at the new university as bizarre as I did. Facilitated by a cross-faculty research grant with John Morgan and Nigel Howarth, Chris and I began to take a more systematic look at the neoliberalising university. Funding from the newly minted Worldwide University Network, a feature of the neoliberalising university, and ongoing conversations with Susan Robertson, Roger Dale and Wendy Lana, all now at Bristol, led to an international project on university reform. Under its auspices and those of a later lavishly funded EU programme on universities in the knowledge economy, I worked with Chris, Susan, Roger, Sue Wright at Aarhus, and a wide group of other colleagues from around the world to trace the pandemic of new public management in universities. This included hosting the Death of the Public University Symposium in Auckland in 2012, and multiple publications that detailed the changing public university. These culminated in my editing of a series of vignettes in the journal Lattice, which give detailed accounts of rankings, award ceremonies, the creation of commercialisation units, and the Circumplex, a Timothy Leary invention that was deployed by an international consultancy to measure dispossessions and impose change culture upon our school. Perhaps it was to try and get us all on the bus. With Richard's prodding and the support of Simon Thrush from 2013, I've explored New Zealand's marine futures, most notably as part of the Sustainable Seas National Science Challenge. An initial project investigating what it might take to do marine economy differently led to 5 years on the challenge leadership team as leader of the blue economy theme, attempting to foster a distinctive blue economy in Aotearoa. The Blue Economy Research Programme consisted of 16 research projects designed to create the conditions of possibility for a blue economy that might arrest the ecological degradations of the oceans and empower communities to prosper from their collectively held marine resources. Each project was possibility-driven and impact-focused. Each involved researchers from diverse disciplinary backgrounds and was to some extent co-developed with businesses, government agencies, community and environmental groups, and Māori entities. All drew on a framing definition of blue economy that, while relatively conservative, inverted the challenge's growth within limits objective. The programme supported several successful initiatives, most notably in relation to hapu-based diverse economy. It also introduced a new language around investment in the oceans, shielded the challenge from pressures to adopt a more orthodox growth logic and informed progressive work on regulatory, scientific and community interventions elsewhere in the challenge. We produced recommendations for government that laid out possible interventions for transitioning to a blue economy and a set of principles to guide businesses, investors and government agencies with some harder-hitting guidelines for how to operationalise the principles. And we held research workshops with community, government and businesses, made multiple public presentations, and earlier this year completed a 13-city, 50-presentation regional roadshow, from which I still haven't recovered. Much of the last 15 years have been about trying to hold together these different projects and relationships. As I now move into being a professor, I have a Marsden exploring the way that global management consultancies, the interview request will come as soon as we get ethics to be able to do it, are imagineering how these entities are imagineering the future by building a knowledge infrastructure that is blurring the boundaries between state and capital. Work on this project has been complemented by the formation with Tom Baker and Larry Murphy of the Politics, Economies and Place, or PEP, research group. Focused on reading at the disciplinary edges and interacting regularly with postgraduate students, PEP has, with Tom's guidance, fashioned an impressive program of work and public intellectualism, and has, for me, provided a reason to be in this place at this time. With John Morgan and Jamie Gillan as conduits, PEP has also helped to cement relationships with the interdisciplinary group, Suzanne and the Buttery Boys, a handle marginally less distasteful than the name of the quiz team that represents it. The group is supporting me to become accultured to the changing university. What I'd like to do now is to focus on three themes emerging from this research program, draw some generic lessons, and then argue for how to respond to the challenge of becoming a professor at this moment in geography. BRICS was funded to build research capability networks and foster a national social science. My work with it included an initial effort with sociologist David Fawns to map the project. We argued that social science posed questions of the social condition, how society, community, nation, organisations come to be, and the processes at work on them: globalisation, capitalism, economy, politics, inequality, culture and the production of power, culture, anthropology, sociology, and so on. And it had defining epistemological, methodological, and political tensions, which lay across an essential criticality and an emancipatory centre at which lay political economy. The map echoed Andrew Sayers' definition of social science as a category marked by defining tensions between criticality, normativity, objectivity, problem definition, and emancipatory intent. He argues that, and I quote, contradictions and dilemmas abound, proliferate and mutate. Yet background forces were aligning against this political economy out way of identifying social science. Morse had discovered Mode 2 knowledge and was debating the impact agenda. It embraced a version of interdisciplinarity that recognised the potential for social science to support both science, earth, environmental, food and otherwise applied, and social policy. He Waka Tangata was invited to play in sandpits with its science analogue, the Oxygen Group. Sorry. The embrace became a fixture of the funding landscape and the projects that emerged. Social scientists were added to project teams to do project management, communication, values detection and behaviour change. Applied social science units in education, social work and population management appeared in universities, the private sector and eventually the CRIs. The new funding landscapes elevated behaviourist accounts and solutionist rationalities and decentered critical theoretical approaches. By the end of the 2010s, social science was being wedded to the language of stakeholding, values engagement, outreach, comms, uptake, and transdisciplinarity. The National Science Challenges were also conceived of this embrace. Participation of social sciences was mandated, especially in the second phase of the challenge from 2020, when challenges were exhorted to become transdisciplinary as a way to uptake and impact, as a pathway to uptake and impact. This process played out alongside the systematic and apparently innocent and inclusive relabeling of academics and scholars as researchers by the PBRF, government agencies, and their own universities. For scholars of the social, not only did this drive a wedge between their researcher and teacher selves and responsibilities, but it concentrated the emerging instrumentalist and solutionist understandings of their work and its value. The Sustainable Seas Challenge included social scientists at its centre and can justifiably claim to have adopted genuinely transdisciplinary research approaches. It took social science seriously, yet still positioned it as a solution building rather than exploration and critique. A language of and focus on social systems, decision frameworks, guidelines, and tools highlighted an underlying reference to technocratic and behaviouralist solutions. The challenge's theory of change was a flowchart running from research project to social impact and anything but a theory. The workshop became a cornerstone methodology, and the yellow sticky was the go-to means of observing and analysing the social and reducing it, and this is the important point, I think, to a knowable and manageable object. Distribution and the socio-political construction of assemblages of social action, such as community, were off the table. There's a story to be told here too about how the rise of Vision Mātauranga and its later refashioning into a recognition of Mātauranga Māori became wrapped up in the same processes, and a more important one of how Māori social sciences escaped co-option to lead their own projects with far more sharply articulated emancipatory objectives. For tonight, however, the point is that in 20 years, the invisibility and apparent irrelevance of social science became centrality, but with social science redefined and political economy excised from its core. I think you should have seen this. Beyond its critical and explanatory, where are we? 14, 15. Yes. Over the last decade, I've come to realise that my research has largely been about economisation. Had I recognised that 15 years ago, I could have been famous, at least in geography. The starting point is Timothy Mitchell's reinterpretation of economy as a social process that mobilises, allocates and stewards resources to yield livelihoods. Material economies are configurations of practices and relations assembled in place. They are always made, and always both cultural and political. The idea of the economy is a fiction created as an object for national development management in the 1930s. Markets are similarly real sites of exchange, but they are also made, and they are also social arrangements, placed, regulated, subjectified, flawed, and so on. Their alleged magical qualities of self-organisation and independent operation are fantasies, as are the claims that they generate efficient or just outcomes. The appeal to the market as the core institution of social organisation is a political and ideological argument. My research has allowed me to build on these insights in three ways. First, it has developed the argument that achieving significant social and environmental outcomes requires that we do economy differently. Second, it has demonstrated the possibilities. I'm getting ahead of myself. Yes, there are four ways. It's demonstrated the possibilities and limits of research that actively engages in making economies in articulation with capitalist economy. Third, it developed the notion of geographical rent. For economic geographer Brett Christophers and others, contemporary capitalist dynamics are based on the pursuit and exploitation of economic rents. I have tried to argue that the rents are essentially geographical, the added returns from doing things here rather than there. They arise from spatial unevenness, the geography of economy, the privatisation and monopolistic preservation of rare or unique resources, and regulatory efforts to overcome these. In Aotearoa, our economy is extractionist and rent-based. Land, sea, whatever small amount of IP we can produce and retain, and the industries that assemble around them, including government. Beyond its critical and... where are we? Yes. Beyond its critical and explanatory potential, our work in Kaikoura, as part of the challenge, demonstrated how the idea of geographical rent can be used to imagine and enact projects of local resourcefulness through collective action. We illustrated the significance of the work of iwi, hapu, and community organisations in assembling diverse, collectively held or generated resources, social, organisational, and natural, for collective benefit, what Tanya Lee calls resourcefulness. In this way, and fourth, it demonstrated the potential of Māori economy to generate collective returns from collective ownership of resources and to our Māori-centred practices at all scales, as if this probably as if this needed to be discovered. It foreshadowed the conclusion picked up on by Matt Scobie and Anna Sturman that Aotearoa's future will depend in large part on how Māori engage with capitalism. We'll come back to that point. Oh, we got this here. Nope, getting ahead. Universities are key sites in the production and translation of knowledge, which we know creates the imagination and material conditions for world-making and is always political in its making and effects. This is the third theme, the neoliberalisation of the university. Ethnographies of universities have traced and theorised their neoliberalisation, but in concentrating on new managerial technologies of control, have missed much of the significance of the centralisation of powers for what universities actually do. What is at stake is the nature of the knowledge that gets made and taught. The public university is distinguished by its independence in determining these things, which have been driven by curiosity and critique in conditions of contest, guided by disciplinary institutions, rather than directed or curated by powerful interests. This has secured academic freedom, which is the public university's deeper purpose and enshrined in New Zealand law. Vice-chancellors are now positioned, however, to define for themselves a post-social democratic purpose for the public university by directing what it does. This will be curated, if not determined, by their vision, funder pressures, intermediary reports, networks, and KPIs. The independence of universities is under threat at precisely the time when this independence is as important as it has been for 100 years. Who decides what knowledge universities make and teach are pivotal questions. The argument then. You thought it had already gone. New Zealand universities depend on government funding. Recent governments have cut funding in real terms and chiselled away at university autonomy through funding directives and increased influence on university councils. Current reviews of the national science system and university funding models promise tightened government control over research and curricula. Governments are making new demands on universities to inform policy for population management and to support economic growth and deal with its social and environmental contradictions. How did that get there? We might have to come back to that. There's one missing. Let me go through it and find it. There it is. What follows takes its license from McKinsey, who see dissent as good for corporations, as if we needed a license. But we have witnessed in our own university a relentless corporatisation designed to take control at its centre. This has been advanced through multiple interconnected agendas: the adoption of corporate language, building a managerial architecture, of units and new executive appointments, erasing disciplines, departments and collegial committees that organise work in independent ways, and forcing an acculturation of staff into new teams and units. Each new university-wide webinar invariably announces a new initiative. Policies, guidelines, policy guidelines, new administrative units, and team identities and loyalties have decentered disciplines and are replacing curiosity and critique as drivers of university life. The recent faculty mergers, course and program rationalisation, and transdisciplinary initiatives illustrate the capacity and the will of the centre to direct the production and teaching of knowledge. We are getting closer to the academic endpoint of severing research from teaching as a defining feature of the academic, a subjectivity that has so frustrated corporatising aspirations to audit, value, cost and manage academics and what they do. What price now, it pains me to say, on the end of the professor? Universities face the unobstructed rule of the manageriate, but for what reason? That's another lecture for another time about anti-political machines, global management consultancies, inclusive capitalism, the collapse of the mutual dependence of democracy and capitalism, and demagoguery more generally. For tonight's purposes, it's enough to observe that it's not true that all this is business as usual, or that staff are excited by it, at least not in a positive way. Such misrepresentations are unworthy of university leaders and should be called out. Rather, the university is being prepared for tighter direction from the centre and more instrumental and solutionist curricula laced with attention to inclusivity. Second step in this argument is that social science will be expected to shoulder much of that burden, but not in the forms we currently understand it and not appropriately resourced. We're some way from recognising that the biggest problems of government are social. But there is a growing recognition that most require social solutions, even if it is only to persuade communities of the value of technical fixes or to change their behaviour. This will require specific knowledge and subjects educated in it. Research and teaching in social sciences are being reframed accordingly. Science friends, now's the time to shut your ears. Alarmingly, scientists are increasingly training themselves in this superficial solutionist social science. Sorry, friends. There is at large a tawdry appropriation of the subject matter, concepts and methodologies to go with the indentured labour of working on science programs, if not a colonisation of fields of social knowledge by applied scientists as they teach the social in their own or transdisciplinary courses and fill interdisciplinary journals with pre-theoretical readings of social processes. This is a structural analysis. There are many examples where projects have made space for social scientists to do their thing and even lead research in cases where individuals do their time reading what it takes to become a social scientist. This world, importantly, also provides opportunities for subversion. I have been the beneficiary. However, colonisation is colonisation. It is hard to see a place for Sayers social science, ironically one that so many students want and that is so valuable to sustain critique, maintain democracy, inform publics fully, and undergird projects of inclusion. What happens to this body of work when it's not recognised in the clock tower and feared in the beehive? I want tonight to finish by offering a potentially positive answer. Well, it's not really an answer, it's just pathways to go forward. And arguing for something, to take back the university at least minimally by reclaiming social science. I'll point to 3 interconnected projects where this work may occur, even if suggesting that we're going to turn it around is going too far. You're supposed to laugh at that. That's a Trump. That's a Trumpism. So, I'll start again. Even if suggesting that we're going to turn it around is going too far. So you've got to laugh now. Otherwise, you won't get the second part of the joke. And it's as distasteful as the big jizzy's getting quizzy quiz handle of Suzanne and the Buttery Boys. Quiz team. The first is the simplest to conceive and possibly also to achieve. That is to create opportunities to do our own work by doing the work that they need. And think, my goodness, that's a complicated sentence. I'll leave that. The first really is to work within programs to achieve what we want to do under the cover of the work that others think that we should do. This might extend to taking back the transdisciplinary and generic degree agendas from the bottom up through lecture content, module capture and course redesign. Or it may be achieved top down by, for example, pledging support qualified by commitments for extensive social science leadership. Some of this is already being achieved. At core is the crucial importance that courses be based on a deep criticality rather than anti-political solutionism. And that criticality does not mean impacts inclusion, behaviour change, ethics, or presenting different perspectives. In both cases, this should be done strategically, collectively, and with allies. We must insist that there is a price to our participation and our co-option. The time and opportunity to do our own research, I suggest, is a price. Our own research on the social, to run our own graduate courses, to hire our replacements. There's a politics to be had in taking the managers at their words, but tying them down to them. The second is closely connected. I'm going to get there, Robin, I think. To commit scholarly energy and resources to knowledge making that will support the doing of economy differently. This is a game of extending both sustainability and place into a social realist agenda, again taking the managers at the words of Taumata Te this time. Somehow I have to go back now. How am I going to do that? Okay, there we are. Let's put new place-based assemblages of place-based resourcefulness and the collective capture of geographic rents at the heart of social science, foster new forms of collective action and support the social and cultural forms that make this a vibrant and free way to live. There is a resurgence of place-conscious political economy in Aotearoa, focused on events, alternatives, or moments of political change. These are increasingly thinking through or attached to the central part that Māori play in contemporary political and cultural economy, diverse and capitalist. My own research teaches me that Aotearoa is a place where we might imagine something better, and that Māori leadership is pivotal, and, as is quoted on the cover of Matt and Anna's book, how Māori engage with capitalism holds the key. Māori political economists are at work in this space. The third is to explore what is possible in geography. And here my geography colleagues get to get angry with me. And to imagine a revitalising social realist turn. I think we've gone beyond that now. Where are we? Yeah. Oh, I'm going backwards, sorry. That's not very smart. Geography is a restless configuration of knowledge production projects, exploring place, space and territory. I am not going to make 6:45. What happens to me? Does a hole open in the ground? Exploring place, space and territory. These projects coexist around a shared empirical focus. Conceptual promiscuity, methodological experimentalism and an emphasis on the situatedness of knowledge, witting or otherwise. There is no discipline-specific canon or unifying skill set that might define a teaching program. Geography in universities has in practice been defined by epistemological divides between the study of social and natural processes. These have seen it located differently in different universities, sometimes in arts, sometimes in science, and sometimes consisting of only social or physical science. Negotiating this divide, building bridges across it, and conceptualising place as the site at which the social and physical interact in collectively lived experiences and managed relations was once geography's strength. But this was in an earlier era of state-led. If you think I'm going on, you should read Cumberland's inaugural lecture in 1946. The inaugural lecture of the inaugural professor. But this was in an earlier era of state-led and managed developmentalism, and when nation building appeared unproblematic. There were soils to categorise, landscapes to break in, and cities and physical social infrastructure to build. All with a critical concern for people, rivers, and hillsides. Region was a key and stable organisational unit. Place was a political and technical matter of concern, and we needed planning and experts with multidisciplinary knowledge. Geography thrived by encompassing the possibilities of integrated spatial planning and economic development at diverse scales. This, of course, disintegrated. Sticking to the narrative that geography is the study of interactions between human and geophysical environments has failed geography, that is, as research specialisation and institutional change have torn it asunder. Physical geographers have chased models and behaviouralism, while human geographers have chased wizened French philosophers, nature cultures, and scholars of care. Others have continued to describe places mired in a world where social process masquerades as common sense in the categories of the development state. Geography's potential claim to the spaces of transdisciplinarity and applied economy, as funding regimes and organisational logics have once again turned favourable, have been overwhelmed by the sheer scale of that turn to transdisciplinarity, as institutional politics and the centre's failure to look up from its consultancy reports to see its own university. I have no wistful love for geography or desire for its cloak of identity, but it is a valuable assemblage of knowledge projects, the fate of which is now entangled with the new project of social science's service to solutionism and inclusion. The first-year courses into which geographers will teach in 2025 will serve as students from across a school that includes earth, information and environmental scientists, and are designed to cultivate interest from other science students. Geography must serve its science master to survive. Success may simply prove that the label geography, the irony, I guess, is that success may simply prove that the label geography is no longer needed, but puts at risk the teaching of much of its subject matter. Failing to succeed will guarantee its demise. Ironically, however, safeguarding its value for the Faculty of Science and the university depends entirely on it being able to do solutionism and inclusion better than others, because it is so richly informed by the full suite of diverse criticality in social science. Its value to an arts faculty may well be the reverse. That's the discomforting dilemma of my career. Don't expect you to read this or understand the diagram, it's just my musings. To survive, I argue that geography needs to be able to articulate a distinctive and unifying purpose and configure a compelling teaching program to deliver on it. If, as my research suggests, geography is the study of economy in the way that I've defined it, and it lives in a science faculty, then for me that purpose is clear. Geography should research and teach economy and how economies come to be, why we should do economy differently and what it takes to do that. We should demonstrate how resourcefulness from cultural practice and belief to natural features and processes, management practices and investment capital is assembled in place. All geographers can in some way sign up to that purpose, whether their starting point is modelling coastal erosion or urban social infrastructure. This would moor geography to the materiality of its diverse interests in a distinctive approach to knowledge and action, and in a way that allows for discipline-led, impactful research and teaching. Coastal erosion, the closure of public libraries, landscape change, the construction of cloud regions, Auckland's area night issues, and the fast-track consenting process can all be taught in that way. Of course, we can't all be geographers. Sad. True. Others will need to find ways to hang on to their disciplines, but as living in conceptually, politically, and methodologically adventurous bodies of knowledge and practice. It is from this position that we might retake the transdisciplinary program and solutionist social science we might retake social science and make the transdisciplinary and solutionist social science moments work for us. We're behind in this game. Okay. To end, I want to acknowledge that working at the university is work, but also a privilege. My own privilege has been extraordinary, literally hundreds of visits to other places. It's probably not the way to measure privilege, but it has certainly been a privileged journey. I've worked in cities from Kaitaia to the Bluff in Aotearoa and in 45 cities internationally, and I've visited a few more getting to them. I've shared dinners and drinks with celebrated geographers on multiple continents, hosted many in the family home, and engaged with vice-chancellors past, present, and even future, we might speculate, over breakfast, lunch and dinner, in trips on walks along beaches and canals, and in late-night drinking sessions in Dublin bars. I've had dinner with a Bruneian princess, as well as a group of New Zealand's finest winemakers paid for by the heiress of the Gallo fortune. It was a big bill. Formal dinners in the Bordeaux and Barcelona town halls and in the castle at Montalcino, Tuscany, I believe. Tastings of, no, this one is really rather, tastings of the millennium vintage of Dom Perignon with the winemaker in the Abbaye d'Auvilliers. Fantastic. A day with Anne-Marie Mole, walking the dikes outside Amsterdam. And I've conducted fieldwork in a giant rugby ball in Tokyo and the World Expo in Shanghai. I've lost the expo slide. I ran out of time being able to put, and I didn't have it anyway, to give you photos of everywhere that I've been lucky to have been. But I did get to hang out in the giant rugby ball with the mayor of and then at the Shanghai Expo with the mayor of Hastings. Fantastic 2 or 3 days. And to top it all, I've had 25 years of teaching thousands of students on 22 undergraduate courses across 5 disciplines, guest lectures in others, and full modules or more in 8 postgraduate courses across 6 postgraduate programs. Can I work out how to make this go in the right direction? This has included closer teaching relationships with 28 PhD students. I hope I've captured your names if you happen to be here. Not all to completion. I'm not sure what that says about me. 47 master's students and 18 honours students. 5 of these graduate students have gone on to work in the New Zealand Academy and 2 in CRIs. Ritesh Shah, Mark Tadaki, Emma Sharp, Valentine Becker, Barbara Ribeiro, Stephen Fitzherbert, and Alison Greenaway. 2 courses stand out. The Geography 207 field course, travelling Te Tai Tokerau, which I taught with Joe Fagan and Gretel Bosvik, Jeremy Hemmer, and on occasions Lindsay Blue and others. And Geog 738, my graduate food course built from a biological economies project with Richard Leheron. Along the way, my research has taught me. As anthropologist Julie Park once told me, what you teach is not necessarily what is learned. The best pieces of your writing are not necessarily those in top international journals. Mine have been in books or in New Zealand journals where I've had the freedom to develop an authorial voice and also to explore what's important for us here and therefore for everyone rather than the other way around. Our purpose is scholarly pursuit, but we can and should serve the university and public meaningfully. Launching experiments and novel concepts from the academy can trouble business as usual and stimulate positive change, but it will come with accommodations, the inevitability of failure, and much discomfort. Transdisciplinarity, Jamie? Yeah. Is a lived and situated knowledge practice. that allows knowledge makers to operate in uncomfortable boundary spaces between application and theory and critique and pragmatism and across multiple bodies of knowledge. That's a research-led finding. It's a finding. I'm not sure it would be counted at that as such at Sustainable Seas, but it's a finding. The list of thanks is long. So, oh God, I keep going the wrong way. How am I going that way? Where's the list of thanks? The list of thanks is probably gone. Okay, it'll have to be off the cuff. The professional staff who've kept me in my job and always made it fun, from Byron Marshall and Gail Arnold to Michael Groom, Anna Simcock, Patricia Ilian, and all those in between. My colleagues and students, my long list of mentors, all of whom have shown me how to be a critical scholar, yet also an engaged university citizen and a constructive political subject. Again, hope no one's name's not off this list. Warren Moran, Richard Leheron, Dick Bedford, Wendy Lana, Roger Dale, Susan Robertson, Pauline McGurk, Hugh Campbell, Gordon Winder, Michael Carolan, Chris Shaw, John Morgan, Simon Thrush. An extensive list. Thank you all for the advice and the opportunities. All those with whom I have collaborated. I did do the counts. There are probably well over 100 people that I've co-published with. And these come from just about every one of my colleagues in the social sciences, in geography. Multiple collaborations with people across disciplines at the University of Auckland and many with those overseas. Those that I've probably collaborated most with in chronological order would be Warren, Richard, Robin Kearns, Yvonne, Gordon Winder, Susan Robertson, Chris, Tom, John, and of course Karen Fisher, with whom I've collaborated considerably over the last few years. And I'd like to thank, of course, my students and the postdocs that I've worked with. This better be in the right direction now. Yes. John Morgan, one of those people who I've benefited immensely from having time with, greeted my promotion with the line, "So what's the project?" Again, he gets it spot on for what a university should be. I don't have a pithy answer, but putting aside the sense that professors may no longer launch projects, may no longer even exist in a shortish period, there are a few things on my agenda. The family, rediscovered in our first family holiday for years, pursuing a revitalised geography, completing the Marsden project, writing 2 unwritten books, supporting generational change in a thriving PEP, and with Simon Thrush, Conrad Pildrich, Karen Fisher and others, restoring the Hauraki Gulf. There's a little project for you. And what I want to leave you with really is this little quote. As well as a promise never again to pick up, write on, or read another yellow sticky. Something that luminary geographer John Allen once said to me over a glass of very good wine somewhere on Victoria Street. There are many ways to be a good academic, he said very wisely. He is a very wise old owl. He's a magnificent man. So, and please don't call me a social scientist, or at least think carefully about the context before you do. Please join Heather and Victoria and myself, the lovely bar manager at Galbraith's, for drinks and nibbles there, and the opportunity to eat and drink more at your own expense after that. The bar manager is certainly set to welcome us. Kia manuia.